part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hello, this is Brooks, and you're listening to the Books with Brooks monthly book club podcast. We are here this month to talk about our August 2022 read, which is a short story compilation called Exhalation by the brilliant Ted Chiang, who is the author of a short story called Stories of Your Life, which was the inspiration for the blockbuster film Arrival. This is his second short story compilation, and we have a couple folks on the podcast to talk about a couple of the stories with us today. Books with Brooks is a Press Play Podcast Network show, and our presenting sponsor this month is Uproar Coaching. Let me guess, you're ready to get serious about your goals, and you're looking for accountability support, but you don't have the time or the tolerance for chit-chat. You're busy balancing work and life and home and bullshit, and your to-do list isn't getting any shorter. You've been talking about making that career leap, finishing that creative project, kicking that bad habit, but you simply don't have the time and the energy to invest in yourself. I get it. You, my friend, are a busy bitch. What if I told you you can get maximum accountability with minimal commitment? Productivity without punishment? Uproar Coaching's Busy Bitch program brings you all of the good stuff you get from a weekly hour-long coaching session, minus the conversation. Here's how it works. Each Friday morning for 5 weeks, you'll receive an email with 3 prompt questions. Take just 10 minutes to answer those questions. By Monday, midday, you'll receive a personal reply offering support and challenging the limitations you're putting on yourself. Listeners of the Books with Brooks podcast get 10% off Busy Bitch by using promo code P3 at checkout. That's the letter P and the number 3. Visit uproarcoaching.com to learn more. It's that simple. So we'll have a few folks on the podcast today to talk about some of the individual stories in this book, Exhalation by Ted Chiang. Overall, I'll just give a quick intro. This book consists of 9 different short stories. They vary widely in length from like 2.5 pages to 110 pages and everywhere in between. They are really... They're kind of, I think they are sci-fi stories, but they're less about the technology, much more about sort of like the philosophy behind technology and like the ethics and the morals and the like big questions that technology introduces into our lives. They're really amazing. The world building is insane. He says a lot in a little, like in just a few pages. My personal favorite story was the really short one, only 2.5 pages long. It's called What's Expected of Us, on page 58 in the softcover copy that I have. And this story, it basically asks like what would happen if it was proven that we as humans don't have free will. It just blew my mind. I don't spend a ton of time mulling over philosophy or thinking about time travel or space. And occasionally it's super fun to just dive into these big questions and really sort of evaluate what you believe about, what makes you you, and why does the world turn, and where did we all come from, and what is our rapidly advancing technology, like what implications does that hold for us as a society going forward? And these stories like bring up all of those questions and many, many, many more. They're amazing. Our book club discussion was so fun. It was just, it was an amazing book club. And overall, the reception to this book has been really positive, which I was nervous about. It's a twist on sort of the content we typically read in book club. So I was afraid everyone was going to hate it. And I was very pleased that was not the case. And actually, several people in book club have said, I've lent it to my brother. I gave it to my husband. My boyfriend's going to read it, whatever. So folks are passing it along, and I love when that happens. I think it means like it was a great story and it gave you a lot to think about, and you want other people to have that reading experience that you really enjoyed. So, without further ado, we'll go into the next section of the podcast and discuss some individual stories with some book club members. Thanks for listening. Hi, Beth.
Hi, Brooke.
How are you doing? Thanks for
I'm
coming on the
good.
podcast. Yeah,
Oh, it's always a pleasure.
always a pleasure. This book was really good discussion. I felt like I was flying high from book club for a solid 48 hours this time.
Me too. That
It
was the best
was,
book club we've had in a long time.
yeah, it was amazing. It was like good setting, great food, amazing discussion. It was the trifecta.
Yes, it really was. I felt like when I left, I felt like I had done something good for my mind and my soul.
Totally. Yeah, we discussed a lot of like, which I knew we would with this book, but like a lot of philosophy and like space and time travel and like morality. And yeah, it was like
Mhm.
big topics
Big topics.
in a cool way. So
Mhm.
what story do you want to talk about today?
Okay, I want to talk about the story, The Truth of, is it fact?
Yeah, the truth of
The truth of
fact.
fact, the truth of feeling.
Ooh, I love that. Okay, for those who would like to follow along, the truth of fact, the truth of feeling is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 story on in my copy, page 185. I know it's really hard to summarize these stories. In fact, I've been challenging myself to try to do that, and it's difficult because they're so high concept, and you find as you're describing it that like you missed an important detail that is a small detail but turns out is like very integral to the story.
Yes.
So knowing that, with that as a disclaimer, do you want to tell us what this story is about?
Sure, I'll give it a go. Basically, we have this narrator whose name Brooks and I have decided that we don't know.
Yeah,
But
I don't think he
it's a
says it.
male. It's a dad. He basically is a journalist, and he has been studying this new product that has come on the market called Remem, which is essentially like a sort of artificial is not the right way to say it. It's like a literal memory. So when you're talking to somebody and you're saying, "Oh, remember that time we went to the beach," or "That time in Paris was so nice," or "No, I think that was Mrs. Smith who taught 3rd grade." Whatever you're saying to somebody, Remem will like pop up a little box in your field of vision at the bottom left corner or something that basically just plays when that actually happened. So a video of you actually being at the beach or Paris or whoever your teacher was, okay?
Yeah.
Because they're living in a world where everything in your life is recorded. So I
Hmm.
think it's something like, technology has gotten to this point where like your brain is technology now.
Hmm.
So everything
Yeah.
is being recorded. And so if you're in a fight with your husband or wife, you can say, "No, you said this," and that memory will pop up and it will literally like prove who's right in the moment.
Hmm.
It's very
Hmm.
bizarre. And so the narrator is going on this journey. He's very skeptical of it. He talks a lot about how he taught his daughter how to read and write, even though in this world those are sort of like unnecessary skills, which I kept thinking about, like script, like right, like cursive handwriting.
Cursive.
Um,
Apparently, they don't teach cursive anymore. I was just talking
they
with a
they
friend about
don't.
that.
They don't. And
Wow.
I mean, that's just kind of an example of what we're thinking about here, but they're kind of in a world where you don't have to read or write anymore. Like the technology is just that and it, the story is really beautifully split between another story that takes place a long time ago in a, as we've decided, is sort of an Aboriginal tribe of people. who do not yet have reading or writing skills because they don't need them. That's not, a part of their life. And then basically this European Westerner comes by discussing religion, and they want to kind of kick him out, but they sort of let him hang around, and he teaches one of the young boys how to read and write, because the boy is interested, and the chiefs of the tribe or whatever think, fine, go ahead. And so we see through the eyes of this young boy his learning about reading and writing, not just the act or how to do it, but like what it actually means, which was so interesting.
It really
um,
was.
and so the story just splices back and forth between these two sort of things, and it's just really beautiful. So
It
that's
is.
my summary.
That's an amazing summary. Great job, Beth. Yeah.
Thanks.
At first I struggled with this story a little bit because the two stories are so different.
Hmm.
And it took me a while to start understanding like why we were reading them parallel to each other, because they're really different and they're about totally different characters in totally different time in different countries, experiencing way different like levels of technology. But I think in the end, it's pretty clear like they're sort of, well, I don't know. Why do you think the stories are like told in parallel that way?
Well, I think you're basically getting a timeline of when a a civilization was learning about reading and writing for the very first time, to a civilization that is like losing reading and writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically just like a history of literacy in a way. And I think that seeing someone discover what reading and writing is while watching someone like, who's in this technically advanced society where they don't need it anymore, you start to like, I don't know, appreciate it more. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, like I thought a lot, and the tribe, basically in their tribe they have this saying that is basically like there's a factual truth, and then there's like a moral truth. And I can't remember exactly what the book says, but there's basically what is right, and then there's like a literal truth, and they have two
Mm-hmm.
different words for truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where it really ties in with the remem, because you've got people who are like, no, you literally said this and I can prove it, but what does that really mean to us as a society? Like,
Yeah. What is
what
it going to do to
what
our society that you can always prove exactly what happened?
and and how do we interpret things? Like, just because you said something a certain way doesn't mean it was interpreted that way, and
Mm-hmm.
like
Or
I
that it was
really love.
intended that way.
Right. And intention's huge. I mean, I love that the narrator in the more modern setting, he says, he was remembering this time with his grandmother. And he's like, I don't want a literal video of what happened during that time. I just want to hold on to that precious memory.
Yeah. Because it might not be what you remember.
Right. So he's saying, I want the right truth and not the literal truth. So I think
Mm-hmm.
that's where the stories really tie in.
Yeah. I love that. That's really beautiful. Okay. I found the section where he sort of distinguishes the difference. So it says, our language has two words for what in your language is called true. The first is what's right, mimi, and what's precise, vu. In a dispute, the principals say what they consider right. They speak mimi. The witnesses, however, are sworn to say precisely what happened. They say vu. Or maybe vo. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. Might be vo. V-O-U-G-H. So yeah, I mean, I think this story is very aptly titled The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling. I feel like this topic comes up a lot in like relationship issues, because it's so often not about the facts, right? It's not about who's right. It's about the feeling that this conflict has created. Um, but that can be really hard for some people. I'm not going to point any fingers, but Jake struggles with this. He's very black and white about what is right and what is wrong. He likes facts. He wants to go back and say, like, I think Jake would love to be able to play a video of me saying something, because he'd be like, I told you I remembered it exactly right. And he probably did, whereas I didn't. But like but that's often not really what conflict is about. It's not really about the factual truth. It's about so much more than that.
Yeah, and the truth of it is that, there are studies out there that say we remember accurately, like, something like 50% or less
Yeah.
of our memories.
Yeah.
And so you have to take that into account, and what is so beautiful in this story, and such a spoiler, so if you haven't read it yet, like, you know, put me on mute for a second, but, like, this guy who's writing this story, I mean, it's all hinged upon this argument that he had with his daughter. Wait, is that a different story?
No, that's the same story. You're right.
Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
I
no,
got
you're right.
confused.
He had that argument with his daughter where she said to him, like,
No,
you're the reason
no,
mom left.
that's a different story though, because isn't
No,
that the prism one?
no, that's his story.
Okay.
It's from him, because he goes
Yeah.
back and accesses the log and watches the fight. And he finds out that it wasn't his daughter who
Yes.
said,
It
you are the
was,
reason mom left. He was the one who said it.
yeah,
You're the reason
he
mom
said it.
left.
Right. Okay, I'm getting them all confused, but, like, basically he's proven wrong, and that he was the one that made the mistake.
Yeah.
And it's just like, we've all been there, but we don't know it. And
Oh,
maybe,
for sure.
you know, I have actually thought to myself in the past, like, wait, did I say that, or did he say that, or did she say
hmm
that? Like,
I mean, I'm
who
getting to the
said
point in
that,
my
you
old
know?
age where I'm like, did that happen to me? Or did that happen to someone that I know and I can't
Yes.
remember?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But part of that mystery, and part of that, like, um part of that feeling is human. So, like, if you take that away and you just give yourself answers all the time,
Yeah.
like, what does that make us? I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah. Well, and this idea of like you no longer have to rely on your infallible human memory because you have an accessible, searchable record of everything that's ever happened to you.
Yeah, and I took, like, a class on memory, and, like, memory takes so much work for the brain, and for things to go from, like, working memory to, like, meaningful memory, it's like, it's a lot. And so if you don't have to do that anymore, you're kind of letting your brain off the hook.
Totally.
It's bizarre.
I wonder too, he didn't talk about this, but like, what is the application of remem for like school? Like, do you still need to remember things to take a test? Like, do you still have to memorize vocab words? Like, so much of school, at least in America, is like rote memorization. So, what happens to that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know
That's
if, like,
interesting.
kids don't get it, like, I don't know.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought was really beautiful about this story is it really talks about literacy, like the ability to read and write, as being an art, which
Hmm.
is not, I mean, I guess writing is an art, sure. Okay. Like a book is a form of art. Okay, like a play or something. But I don't think about these skills as art because they're so fundamental. These are the skills you need to do art. They are not in
Right,
themselves
exactly.
art. But this this story really flips that, because like the priest who comes to the village teaches the young boy the art of writing. And they're even
Hmm.
like the way that they describe it is like art, like it looks like art to him. It's like markings and these unique markings, whatever. And then the loss of the ability to write being like a lost art,
Yes.
kind of like cursive, I guess,
Yeah.
is so interesting. And there were really amazing moments in this story. Just like I love to read like the describing of language and ideas and like things that are simple to us because we have grown up knowing them, but like describing them to someone for the first time, like what is a word?
Mhm.
What is a word? And it's like, well, I don't know. It's just a word. It's only one part of a sentence, one word in a sentence, but you can't define the word word without using the word word. Like
Right.
that was really cool
Mhm.
part of that story that I liked a lot.
Yeah, what was
Um,
that quote that you
oh yeah, and then there's this amazing quote. So it says, as he practiced his writing, Jajinki came to understand what Mosby had meant. Writing was not just a way to record what someone said, it could help you decide what you would say before you said it. Words were not just the pieces of speaking, they were the pieces of thinking.
Mhm.
Whoa. Whoa.
I mean,
And
it was just it blew my mind when he's like, "I don't understand words." He didn't get it at all because in his mind, his language did not have breaks. Like
mhm.
they it was just continuous. Like he couldn't even visualize a word because he'd never heard that before. And that's just so cool.
But what are words? How can I explain it? He thought a moment. If you speak slowly, you pause very briefly after each word. That's why we leave a space in those places when we write. Like this. How many years old are you? And like he still doesn't get it. Like it's so yeah, like why
Yeah.
do we do it that way? Ah, it's blowing my mind. Oh, it's what like all of the stories are like this. They just have these mind-blowing moments that are like
Mhm.
totally
Mhm.
make you think the opposite of what you thought before.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
It was just really beautiful.
It was so beautiful. Beth, thank you so much for coming on the podcast to discuss Ted Chiang's beautiful sixth story, The Truth of Fact, The Truth of Feeling.
It's my pleasure, and I
Yeah,
will remember this forever.
yeah, right. We won't remember who said what, but luckily there will be a record.
Yes.
All right. See you next month, Beth. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Let me guess, you're ready to get serious about your goals and you're looking for accountability support, but you don't have the time or the tolerance for chit chat. You're busy balancing work and life and home and bullshit, and your to do list isn't getting any shorter. You've been talking about making that career leap, finishing that creative project, kicking that bad habit, but you simply don't have the time and the energy to invest in yourself. I get it. You, my friend, are a busy bitch. What if I told you you can get maximum accountability with minimal commitment? Productivity without punishment. Uproar Coaching's Busy Bitch program brings you all of the good stuff you get from a weekly hour-long coaching session, minus the conversation. Here's how it works. Each Friday morning for 5 weeks, you'll receive an email with 3 prompt questions. Take just 10 minutes to answer those questions. By Monday, midday, you'll receive a personal reply offering support and challenging the limitations you're putting on yourself. Listeners of the Books with Brooks podcast get 10% off Busy Bitch by using promo code P3 at checkout. That's the letter P and the number 3. Visit uproarcoaching.com to learn more. It's that simple. Hi, Mom.
Hi, honey.
Oh, thanks for coming to be on the podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
What story do you want to talk about today?
Well, this story is the longest story in the book, and it's called The Life Cycle of Software Objects,
Ah, yes.
which the name itself does not appeal to me.
Yeah,
And
true.
the life cycle of software objects.
Sounds so boring.
That's so boring.
Yeah.
And yet the story is so complex that it's kind of hard to summarize it in like a Reader's Digest version of an already short story.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a theme. I mean, I think this one especially because it is the longest, like 110 pages. So it's long. It's a good chunk of this book we spend on the life cycle of software objects. But I think a lot of the stories are really hard to describe because this is sort of a theme of this book is they're really high concept. There's a lot of detail in them that is like really important to the story and without those detail. So yeah, like giving a summary is kind of hard. Um then that's, I think that's sort of remarkable. I mean, he's building these really, really rich stories in not that many pages, which is amazing.
It is.
Like building whole worlds. I mean, I remember when I learned that the movie Arrival wasn't based on a book, it was based on a short story that was like 30 pages long. And they made a whole feature film out of it. Like, that's how rich these stories are. So, why don't you do your best and tell us what the life cycle of software objects is about?
Okay, but
Do
I
your
agree with
best.
you. You could make a 3-hour movie out of this short story
Oh,
without
yeah.
any problems at all.
Hmm.
But to try and summarize it, it's got a little bit of everything in it, from high tech virtual pets to romance, but also in the raising of these virtual pets, they get into all of the societal problems that we deal with today in raising our children or raising our dogs or our pets.
Yeah.
Um, and then with the love and the romance aspect thrown in between the two humans that are um, the main characters in the story, the main human characters, it gets very, very complicated.
Yeah, it does. It gets very complicated. So yeah, I mean it's a good description though. Basically, we follow the stories of these two humans who work for a software company who develops what they call digiants. Think of them as like really, really high tech, like Tamagotchis. Y'all remember Tamagotchis where you had to like feed them and keep them alive and like give them treats and teach them tricks. It's that idea. But it's sort of a future society where like the internet is like what we think of right now probably is like the metaverse. It's like it's very large. It's like heavy simulation. It's more advanced than what we currently think of as the internet. And so people would get these digiants, which were like animated animals that you would teach and grow and feed and everything that you would do to a Tamagotchi and more, or that you might do to a child, or like you said, like a pet. And then it touches a lot on like the ethics of that. Um, and questions a little bit like what makes a sentient being, what makes an autonomous being. Like the Digiants get to a point where they want to become corporations. They want to become incorporated so that they can make their own decisions and basically operate autonomously from their owners who are human. And then they even escalate it further where they start being able to put the Digiants into robots who operate in the real world. So
Right.
then you can interact with your Digiant face to face. You can take them to the park. You can ride in the car. You can take them to McDonald's, whatever. And they're physically with you in the real world, even though they're virtual pets.
And they're still somehow operated out of the digital world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they exist online, but they're growing and they're learning and they're changing and their vocabulary expands and like
They
basically,
learn to
you know,
read.
then they have different personalities and they really like develop based on how you raise them the same way that like a child would. And then
Right. And that's a big point, I think, in this story is genetics versus environment.
nature versus
Because,
nurture.
yes, because they're just clones of each other or genomes of each other, but they're all different based on who raises them and how they're raised.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
mean, there are just so many little intricate details that relate to human raising of children that you can't touch on all of
No,
them.
you can't.
But you did a very good job of describing this. I couldn't describe it that well. You did a
Oh,
very
thank
good
you. I thought
job
you did a
of
good job
describing it.
too. I mean, it is like complicated, and I mean, I think it's relevant because as we're watching technology advance and as we're spending more and more time on the internet, we probably are in our lifetimes going to start dealing with some of these questions of like, is it moral to turn off, or I think they called it in this story,
Suspend.
a like a digient, like your online pet. Like they're not alive, but they're aware, they're conscious, and maybe they're not conscious either, but they're aware enough to understand the difference between being suspended and being activated. So they express like, I don't want to be suspended. I want to live. Like they can directly ask for things, and they have desires, and they have wants, and they have needs, and
Likes and
yeah,
dislikes.
like just the same way that humans do. And at one point in the story, which I thought was really, really sad, like, at first when the Digiants go on sale, they're hugely popular and thousands of people get them. But then, of course, people lose interest, right? And they don't want their Digiants anymore, but they feel bad suspending them. So they basically give them to shelter. They literally call them shelters, like animal shelters.
Rescue
Yeah,
shelters.
and so then
Yeah.
these virtual shelters pop up to accept the Digiants that nobody else wants and hopes someone else will adopt them, try to keep them from being suspended. Like it was a true parallel to what we see with animals and pets in the real world.
And children.
Yeah.
That's why we have a foster care problem in today's society. It is so many. We get tired of the responsibility, and we want somebody else to take it on.
Yeah. And so what is like kind of where's the line? Like what do you do? I don't know. And it was interesting too, because it was this brand new technology, and even the people who created it didn't really know. They'd studied them for like a year or whatever, but beyond the first year, they didn't really know what they would be capable of, how they would develop, like
Right.
what they would do. And so, like, who's responsible for that? And then, of course, you're dealing with technology. So there comes a part in the story where the Digiants, like the sort of the internet gets upgraded, and the Digiants don't, because the company who created them has gone defunct. So the Digiants can't be ported over to the new internet. So they are stuck basically in an empty world. I mean, that is really interesting. And it reminds me of like I used to love to play The Sims. Remember I would play The Sims growing up?
Yeah, all the time.
You'd have it on a CD-ROM that you'd put in your computer. And then eventually, like, we stopped having computers that could use CD-ROM, so I couldn't play my Sims anymore. Like, basically this happens already. Yeah, just so interesting. And the world building in this story was really amazing.
Yeah, it was very complex. But, it came down to I think in the end, is it wrong to just suspend these creatures, if you will? Or is it better to let them progress to the next stage of life, which, as it portrayed them when they got into teenagehood, if you will, people lost interest in them because they were more demanding, they were harder to deal with, and
Yeah.
people didn't want to deal with that. And then also after teenagehood comes sexuality, of which these Digiants were not programmed to have those desires, so they never develop them. But humans come along that want to develop a sexual part of the Digiant so that they can become mates with humans. And it just gets weirder from there.
But I mean, again, it introduces a ton of like ethical questions. And it even brings up at one point, like, we talked about this at book club, and it was a weird conversation to have. Like, it's very strange to like challenge these like core beliefs of our society, which is like primarily we believe that like bestiality is wrong. You shouldn't have sex with animals. And so like I feel like by the transient property doesn't matter. Let's try to use a math term. Didn't go well. You can, then sort of like apply that to a digital life. So they're sort of like animals in the digital world. You shouldn't have sex with them either because they can't consent to that, I guess. But like, then some of them are consenting to it. And it gets to a point in the story where they're saying like, no, we want that. We want that. Please can like, let us do that. And so then it's like, again, like how autonomous are they? Is it crueler to let them, essentially be used for sex or to turn them off? Which one morally do you choose? I don't know.
Yeah. They equated it to euthanasia.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe we should ask Dr. Kevorkian. I don't know.
We should ask Dr. Kevorkian. Yeah, this story was so interesting. Well, and you called me at one point during it to say that you're teaching your dog to talk or to read, right?
To read. I'm trying to. It's not going really well, but I'm trying to.
Yeah. See?
Yeah.
So
He
cool.
doesn't get
He's
it.
not getting it.
No. He just looks at me like I'm. But
and what
yeah.
for our listeners, what kind of dog do you have?
Oh, I have a golden doodle.
And what's his name?
And his name's Ozzy. And he's really smart, but he's not taking to the reading part.
Yeah. Well, and that sort of happens with the Digiants too. Like some of them seem more capable than others. And like, then there's like other generations of the Digiants, which are like designed to be better at different things. And so those ones can read, and then some of the other ones can't read. And then you end up with this sort of like hierarchy of Digiants based on like what they're capable of. And then another question that this story raises, and there are so many, I'm sure this is not the last one, but there's also a question of like, should they work? Should they have jobs? Like, should they be given that responsibility or that like opportunity to work and make money to be autonomous? Or is giving them jobs like cruel, And I mean, I feel like you can ask that of everyone. Like, should we have to have jobs, or is it cruel? Like, I don't know. Is it good for us or is it bad for us? It's probably a mixture of both.
Well, that's like the female character, human character, Anna, not sure how you pronounce her name. If you had anybody who listened to the book, maybe they know.
Yes, we did have a few people actually. I didn't ask that question though. I'm not sure.
She believes one way, that they should mature gradually as opposed to speeding things up. And that's a whole nother issue also, about how fast should they learn, and why take the time to. She feels that they need to learn by experience, and that there's no better way to learn than through experience. But yet she doesn't want to set her Digiant up for failure. And then another point to be made on that is how we learn. We learn through failure.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother. There are just so many different little aspects in here that I suggest to your readers, if you've not read the book, you definitely should, or at least this story. Although I love the book and I loved almost all the stories. I think I just related a little more with this one because of my dog.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I'm glad you liked the book. Honestly, I wasn't sure. This is really a departure from what we typically read in book club. So I was a little nervous about folks' reactions to it, but it actually seemed it seemed like a hit. And since we've read it, I've had several people say like, "Oh, I gave it to my friend or I gave it to my boyfriend or I gave it to my husband." So people are passing it along, which I think is a sign of like a really interesting read if you want other people to have the same experience. I mean, it's very mind-blowing. His whole thing is like really makes you think.
Yeah, every story has a relevant moral undertone to
Mhm.
it that is going to have two sides, to every issue in
Yeah,
it. And so it's makes for good
it does.
conversation in a book club.
Mhm.
But I would recommend this book to people, even though I am not sci-fi really isn't my
Yeah.
genre, but every time you choose a sci-fi book, I end up loving it.
Ah, so maybe sci-fi is your genre.
And maybe it is, and I just shy away from it because it's so complex. I think I won't understand it,
Yeah.
and I'll have to just concentrate too hard. I really just want to read for pleasure in my old age. I don't want to have to.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally.
but and this makes you think. It makes you really stop and put things into perspective and kind of relook at things from another way of seeing
Mhm.
things. And
Yeah, those are good. Those are all good things. I really felt like this was such good discussion at book club. Um, yeah, it's like broadening your mind in a really interesting way.
yeah,
And I don't actually really like philosophy. Kind of hurts my brain, and I don't think I'm too practical, perhaps. Um, but occasionally it's really fun to like think about free will and time travel and what makes something alive. Like occasionally it's really fun to explore those big questions, even though they kind of freak me out and hurt my brain.
yeah, I would agree with that summation entirely. But the other sci-fi book that blew my mind that I didn't want to read, but I did, was Ready Player One.
Yeah. Ready Player One. That's a good one.
And that is one of my favorite books to this day.
Wow. Did you read Ready Player Two sequel?
I did, and I enjoyed Ready
Ugh,
Player
I
Two.
hated it.
I know, but I
Well,
enjoyed
I'm
it.
glad you
So
liked it.
maybe sci-fi is my
Maybe
genre,
it
and
is.
I
I have some
just
more recommendations for you if you want to try some others. I think you should
okay.
try The Martian by Andy Weir, which was also a major motion picture starring Matt Damon. I thought the movie
Yeah,
was
I think
cool, but kind of eh. The book is way better.
well, most books are, but I did see that movie,
Hmm. Yeah, it's about a guy who like gets
The
stuck on
Martian.
Mars and he has to try to
Yeah,
figure out how to survive.
figure out how to
Although I
get.
will
Yeah,
say, and I was talking to someone about this the other day, like Andy Weir's books, and this book is sci-fi, but it's also like it's not really about the technology. That is not the focus of most of these stories. The focus is much more like relationships or um society, or it's just a little
societal.
headier. And a
Yes,
complaint that I have about Andy Weir is that he gets really bogged down in explaining like how the spaceship works or whatever, which for me is not that interesting because I don't know about how spaceships work. And I'm
hey,
like,
how does an airplane fly and how does a boat float?
yeah,
I don't
how
know.
does any of this work?
I'm
Right.
not sure I want to know.
Yeah. So that is one complaint I have, although I still find them very enjoyable. So I sort of tend to skim those sections or tune out a little bit when he gets deep into the technology sections. But you can get I mean, you can understand like the point. It's like, okay, yeah, he used his own poop to grow some food. Like, got it. Which is something that he does. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's a recommendation for you.
but do you say his last name Chang? Ted Chiang, the
Yeah,
author?
Ted Chiang.
That is one thing that I think he is very good about not doing.
Hmm.
Well, he does have to give you some, there has to be some bit of how things work so that you can understand why these issues are coming up. But I don't think, dwells on the every little aspect of the development of these digients from, a
Yeah, we're not
Microsoft.
learning about the coding of the Digians. No.
Yes,
Right.
right.
Right. Yeah.
So that makes it a more enjoyable read to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Totally.
so yeah, I would recommend this book to anyone who just
That's great.
wants to read something to think about it. So I would have loved to have been able to participate in book club to see
Yeah.
what discussions arose there. Did you solve any world problems or?
I don't think we did. No, I don't think we solved any world problems. So we did have a really good discussion. It was a great book club. It was in person, which is why you couldn't join.
Yeah.
And it was yeah, it was just big, heady topics, like the big questions of life we talked about, which was really fun.
Yeah. So was the consensus favorable for this book?
Yeah, it was not unanimous,
Really?
but even the folks who said they didn't like it were like, I get it. Like like they didn't hate it, I guess is what I would say. There were no like hard thumbs downs, which is great and kind of rare. The people who didn't like it basically were like, this kind of isn't my genre, or I don't like short stories, was more the feedback, which I get. Like, I mean, I don't really read short stories that often either, and it is a different experience than reading a novel.
I quite
and-
enjoyed it though. I don't read them often either, but this made me think, I should read more short stories.
Totally. I'm with you. It made me feel that way too. So maybe we'll pick another one.
Well, hats off to Ted Chiang. I do say it makes me. I did not read his other book.
Stories of Your Life and Others.
Yes,
It's called.
yes, and
We'll pick it
this
up.
has made me want to read it.
I mean, that one too. I think I liked this book better than that one, but I also knew what to expect this time around, which I think made a huge difference. I picked that one up kind of randomly because I liked Arrival, the film, so much. I wanted to read the book that it was based on. And then after I bought it, I was like, oh my God, it's actually only a short story. But it's definitely worth reading. There were some stories in that book that I did not like at all. And I didn't have that experience with this book. So I don't know if that's because his writing was different this time, or because I just knew what to expect and so it was easier to read them. It could be that second one. Maybe I should go back and read it again. But yeah, it's the same, like, it's the same style, it's the same sort of concepts of stories that will blow your mind.
Yeah, I mean,
so pick it up.
This was my favorite short story, but I'd say I enjoyed all of them.
Yeah, my favorite was the really short one.
What's Expected of Us?
Yeah,
it was like 2.5 pages long.
Whoa, I know. And even at 2.5 pages, I was like totally blown away. I couldn't believe that story. It was so cool and so short and really powerful.
And he does manage to say a lot in a little space of time.
Yeah. Big time.
And he conveys more than just the words or the mechanics of it. Even in this short space of time that he has to in these short stories, he's still able to delve into the philosophical issues and the personalities, and still builds the characters in that short amount of time, which makes me think, okay, and then you get a movie for an hour and a half and you're walk away thinking, I don't even know if I like that character.
Yeah, totally.
Because you didn't know him well enough to take a stance one way or the other.
Yeah.
So he has a real talent for that.
He does. Well, I think he does a great job, like you said, of introducing often opposing viewpoints but is not preachy. And it really does let you as the reader kind of make your own call or like feel however you want to about the subject matter. Like it isn't preachy and he's not like
Or judgmental.
preaching about, yeah, it's like, here are just some like ethical dilemmas that these characters are going to experience, like, and they're just laid out. They're not subjective, I feel.
Right, I agree. Not judgmental. He's just, here they are, and
Mhm.
here's the pros and here's the cons, and you make your own decision on,
Yeah.
which way
Yeah.
you want to go.
There's no like conclusion. Yeah,
No.
totally. Which is really, it's so cool. And it really like leaves you with so much to think about. And on that note, we shall wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about the life cycle of software objects.
He could have chosen a more appealing title. That would
I
be
know, I
my
agree, but I think
only
it was on
fan of
purpose.
this whole short story.
No, but I think it was on purpose. I think it was on purpose because the story is so emotional and like so the opposite of that title. I think it was on purpose.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it was
if
on
you ever
purpose.
get to talk to him
Oh,
or
wouldn't that be
interview
great?
him
Wouldn't that be
on your
great?
podcast, that's the number one
That's your question.
question I would like
Okay.
answered by
Cool.
the author. And on that note, thank
right.
you, honey.
Thank
Always
you.
love reading with Books by Brooks.
Happy reading.
Books with Brooks, I guess I should say. Although I'm
Books
still
with
waiting
Brooks.
for you to write one.
Oh, me too. I'm waiting for that as well.
Okay, love you.
Books with Brooks is produced by Mo Barrow with theme music by Jonathan Allen. Books with Brooks is part of the Press Play Podcast Network, which empowers hosts to create high-quality professional shows that inspire and entertain. If you've been dreaming of hosting your own podcast, we can help. Please email content@pressplaypodcasts.com to get started today. Please be sure to subscribe to get the latest episodes wherever you listen to podcasts.